Today I want to deep dive on the story of the Gaslight District. This is the latest indie animated series from Glitch Productions, and like each of the shows they've been making since Murder Drones at least, there are very intense mythological themes that in this show go directly to the apocalyptic. My name's Deepcut, welcome back to Cartoon Universe. Today, we're gonna break down the plot for the Gaslight District and its real-life apocalyptic inspirations. But really quick, I want to shout out our editor Haro for his hard work on this extra long video, as well as our animator and social media manager Aldo. Aldo was able to decode the alphabet in the show that gives us a lot of clues of what's going on in it. You can grab the chart to keep for yourself off of our X account, Blue Sky account, Instagram, or Tumblr, links in the descriptions down below, and don't forget to follow us there for more cool graphics and goodies like these. In the description, we'll also include the link to a GitHub bot that Aldo made, where you can actually type in the Gaslight District codes yourself to see what the English conversion is. The show, of course, takes place in a world where everyone on Earth, save for our main character, is technically a zombie, an undead human who can't actually die in the way that we imagine. Anytime they experience a physical death, no matter how brutal, their body is revived after just one moment, and they continue on like nothing happened, other than sustaining some bodily damage and some rotting. It's because of this they no longer think of themselves as human, but instead are called rotlings. The show focuses mostly on Mel, who isn't actually undead herself, but seems to want nothing more than to be a rotling like everyone around her. To Mel, these people are immortals having fun, people who can't die even if they can get hurt, with the bravest of them taking bullets anytime they do a job just to get it done. The problem for Mel is that this world is supposed to end thanks to a human who is born once every 10,000 years. So despite Mel wanting to live in this dying world, she is the one who is actually supposed to destroy it as the one human born from an angel's egg who isn't actually a zombie. It's yet another great apocalyptic show, but why are so many shows these days about the apocalypse to begin with? And more than that, why is it always about an apocalypse with such mythological and really just outright religious themes? An apocalypse on its own makes sense for great storytelling. It's the most climactic thing that can happen in the world, the actual end of it. But with the mythological themes, it seems like the media, even on the indie level, is trying to tell us something. It's no secret that a lot of people think we are living in the end times, but what they often don't know is just how much the scripture of the various religions actually supports this, and in many ways the ideas behind the end of the world are presented very similarly to how they appear in the Gaslight District. In the pilot, it's explained that the world as we know it, as in the world we live in as the audience, ended eons ago. However, this new world can also be ended itself. In the opening scenes, it explains that what's left of this world, the Gaslight District, is prophesied to be ended by the human born from the angel's egg. This, however, doesn't appear to be the end of the entire planet, but rather the next step in the evolution of the Earth. The end of the world as they currently know it, just how it ended the way as we know it. So what we have here in the show is really three worlds. The world as it was, the world as it is at the time of the Gaslight District, and the world that it's supposed to become. The world that could be created through Mel. We say world here, but in each case this seems to more so refer to an era on the same planet, and the same is true for most of our apocalyptic religions, such as Judaism. In Judaism, the world is explained as being created in 6 days in the Bible, but this entire world is just a transitionary phase for the world to come. This is found in the greater Jewish tradition outside of the Bible, such as in the writings of the Talmud, a comprehensive 50-volume commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible that explains the oral stories and prophecies passed down by the Jewish people. In the tractate Sanhedrin 97, one scribe explains that the intent for this current world was only to exist for 6,000 years. This started with 2,000 years of chaos, which are the earlier parts of the Bible before the flood. Then came 2,000 years of Torah, where the Jewish people and their ancestors were guided by God directly. Then there is a final 2,000-year period that they call the coming of the Messiah, following which there is supposed to be the world to come where God rules supreme. This idea of a 6,000-year countdown to the new world comes from the creation story in Genesis 1, which explains that it took 6 days to create the world. In Judaism, number systems can generally escalate in scale, so 1 day can mean 1 day, but it can also mean 1 year or 1 decade or 100 years, or as is the case in the Talmud, 1,000 years. It all just depends on the context. So like in the Gaslight district, what we have is not literally a new planet Earth created from scratch between this world and the world to come, but more of a renewal of the worlds marked by great destruction and catastrophe. It's because of this that other later Jewish texts like the 13th century Zohar explain that there were actually many worlds that existed before our current one, lost to history due to cataclysms that led to our current timeline. This is backed up by the other mythologies where we see the same pattern play out. All the way across the sea in the Aztec culture, for instance, they had the belief that there was 5 worlds that were created and destroyed, with humans currently living in the 5th era. The Greeks meanwhile maintain that there are 5 ages of man currently, with us again living in the 5th, ruled by Zeus. Interestingly, in Judaism, their calendar says that we are just under 300 years until the year 6000, though other counts based on the numbers and events in the Bible place us at just over the year 6000 right now. With that in mind, the Jewish prophecies indicate that we are near the end times, and due to the nature of free will, the exact timing of events is actually unknown. The 6,000 year mark is essentially given as a round number, around which the different apocalyptic events are meant to occur. There's thus a lot of hype built up around the concept of not just the end of the world, but the end of our world, and what that will look like if the end of the world is actually in our near future. Now, there is a lot of apocalyptic literature, by which I here mean end-of-the-world literature, and not just revelation-based literature, which is what apocalypse actually translates as. There are stories of great coming disasters in Judaism, Christianity, the Nordic mythologies especially, and all over the world really. They can describe many different things, especially in terms of what general cataclysms to expect, but what they all seem to have in common are the themes of war, destruction, death, and resurrections. Generally speaking, these texts refer to resurrection as more of a good thing, something that comes about because of the greatest of gods, regardless of the religion, in order to bring back the people who deserve it the most. In Christianity, they mostly look at the biblical book of Revelation for their prophecies, which describe 2 resurrections. One that is just for the moral first, and one that comes later where the evil are resurrected as well in order to face judgment. Despite this, a lot of biblical conspiracy theorists still believe that there will actually be some form of immortality offered by one of the false prophets before the second coming of Jesus. The inspiration for this undead magic may more so come from the description in Revelation 9, however, where a plague of locusts is sent over the earth to attack the humans. Here, it describes the humans as wanting death, truly longing for it, but not being able to find it, and that this will have something to do with the Mark of the Beast. The Mark of the Beast in the Bible is said to prevent you from returning at the first resurrection, with a lot of fans of the Gaslight district wanting this to have some sort of connection to the Mark of the Black Hand in the show. This is the magic symbol that seems to be keeping all of the Rotlings in the Gasling district alive. It is with the Black Hand's power that anyone who dies is automatically revived. And though it doesn't have the number of 666 that is associated with the beast, a lot of people point out that there are 6 lines attached to the center of the image of this hand. 5 representing fingers, and 1 seemingly looking like the arm. So far, the Gaslight district doesn't focus on trying to fit the cryptic symbolism of any of these mythologies in particular, but instead creates a mystery about how the world ended using background clues in the show. When the pilot first opens, it explains that the world as we knew it ended eons ago, as we said, with the background showing cities from our time at the bottom of the ocean. This immediately implies a flood similar to that in Noah's Ark, one that was meant to kill all of the sinful humans. The flood in the show may have been somewhat natural, but the artwork from the prophecies in the show show what looks like nuclear bombs being involved with the chaos surrounding the Angel Egg. The Gaslight district itself appears to be one last settlement of humans on an otherwise flooded Earth. They aren't on an actual island, however, but rather a structure that has been floating in the sea, covered in other buildings and leftover destruction from the previous society. The upper layer of this place is the Gaslight district, where the people are presented as being free. Here they have to live with the gaslight lamps in order to keep things lit because no other technology is usable while floating on this rock. Meanwhile, there's also no natural land to grow food on either, so the humans eat disgusting mutant flies instead. They are technically immortal here, but they do experience death, so if they don't eat these flies, they will experience the pain of starvation and die of starvation over and over again. Just like how in the water, we see rotlings drowning over and over again and being brought right back to life just to drown again. Now, this structure's design isn't random. At first glance, it looks like a Roman Colosseum floating upside down. This is important as in both Jewish and Christian prophecy, Rome is said to face extreme destruction before the renewal of the worlds, as well as be the center of corruption leading up to it. However, this design isn't actually that of a Colosseum, which is designed to have an open top in order for the sun to get through. Instead, when you look at its design as a whole, with the bottom of it being obscured in the water, you'll realize it's actually an upside-down ziggurat, the popular depiction for the Tower of Babel from the Bible. This was a tower built by the descendants of Noah to reach the heavens and put themselves alongside God. For this pride, the humans were punished and scattered, being given different languages so they wouldn't work together in this way again. In both cases, the imagery is apocalyptic, with many believing the figure known as the Whore of Babylon in the Book of Revelation to really just be Rome itself. However, this structure's inspiration goes even beyond the Bible when you look at the map of it and see that there's actually 9 levels to it. We see this map at the entrance to Paradise Lost, where it explains that anyone who trespasses will be sent to the Inferno, the 9 levels that exist below the Gaslight District, used as something of a prison for the Virtue Corps. This 9-tiered prison structure that the Gaslight District is built on matches the description of hell given by Dante Alighieri in his work The Divine Comedy from the 14th century. In this text, hell is referred to as the Inferno, just like the prison, and it's described as having 9 circles, each associated with a different type of sin and a different type of sinner. Ken indicates that he had a long stay there for some reason when he was being tortured by one of the virtues, who work on behalf of heaven but are just as evil as the rest of the rotlings in the Gaslight District. Now, despite having this identical structure to hell from Dante's Divine Comedy, there doesn't appear to be any 7-tiered structure that matches its description of purgatory, with that more or less just being the Gaslight District itself in the show. The show focuses more so on the Gaslight District being the connecting bridge between the Inferno and heaven, with this area really just being the uppermost layer of the prison where the most behaved rotlings are allowed to self-manage. And they aren't even entirely self-managed, of course, as the entire structure below the angels seems to be run by the mysterious Virtue Corps who keep the Gaslight District in line. The Virtue Corps in the show is a group of rotlings that are working on behalf of heaven, but with how vile they appear to be, at least Diligence, it makes their name a fun irony. The leaders of this group appear to be the 7 virtues, of which we meet Diligence and Temperance in the pilot. In Dante's Divine Comedy, the job of the virtues is to move the souls of purgatory towards redemption, making the slothful run, for instance. But here they each seem to have their own unique job that helps support heaven. The most threatening of these appears to be Diligence, who runs heaven's defense, guarding the entrance of Paradise Lost, as they call it, and the Mother Angel. Temperance, meanwhile, appears to be some sort of scientist, experimenting on rotlings and such, but also having some sort of connection to Mel. When Mel pitches this mission, Ken doesn't seem to take her plan very seriously, but the one thing he does ask about is if the intel on which virtues are going to be there is actually accurate. This is because Ken wants to hunt down and kill the virtue of Temperance, or at least get as close to killing as you can in the Gaslight District. Many of the rotlings are so far gone that they've begun to replace themselves with other pieces, and the elite virtues seem to have the first access to robotic technology. It was likely the virtue of Temperance that first pioneered this technology, creating a way to make him and the other virtues more powerful and effective, while also possibly removing the suffering that the other rotlings feel as their corpses decay. It seemed like Ken wanted revenge on Temperance for what happened when he was imprisoned in the ice layer of the Inferno, as we can see a virtue torturing him there. Perhaps Temperance experimenting on how the rotlings react to damage using prisoners, as he might need to for his technology. However, a lot of fans think that the photo Ken has of Temperance has him holding the real angel egg that Mel came from. Though honestly, it's so hard to see that I have no idea what's really going on in the photo. Regardless of that, the pilot made it clear that Temperance had something to do with the birth of Mel when he begs for Ken's mercy and explains that he hasn't told the secret to anyone, with the only secret Ken cares about being Mel's birth. In order to keep this secret, cementing doesn't seem to be enough here, and Ken does have something of an actual grudge as well, so to kill him, so to speak, he actually rips out his brain and devours it. This brain still has the seal of the Dark Hand on it, which causes a rotling to come back to life. But with this brain inside of Ken's stomach, Temperance is essentially removed from the story, at least for now. Finally, when it comes to talking about heaven, you have to talk about the angels. The depiction of angels is rather unique in the Gaslight District, as it presents them as black birds with halos over their heads and crosses in their eyes, instead of the more typical depiction of glowing white beings with bright white wings. They seem to exist just to watch over the Gaslight District, watching them almost like they're cameras for some other angelic being to see. I'm told that these aren't just any blackbirds either, but actually vultures, which makes sense as vultures are known to follow around dying animals, waiting to pick at their corpses. It feels as if they are here for some sort of final feast on the dead rotlings, something described in the book of Revelation chapter 19, when God sends a horde of birds to eat the flesh of the enemies of Jesus Christ. The angels are interesting as they do work with the rotlings, but in a unique way. Only the mother angel seems to have the human intelligence that allows her to talk, but the other angels do have the ability to understand. We see the virtue cores using the lower level angels similar to police dogs, with their job being to sniff out the rotlings that may be trying to hide in the truck. But they are also animalistic enough that they can be worked up into a frenzy when one of them is killed by Breadhead. Even though the virtues are on the side of the angels, they do have to defend against the angels when they become an angel storm, being worked up into something of a hive mind, attacking everything in their path. The mother angel meanwhile is taller and seems to have human level intelligence and speech, but her job seems to just be laying the eggs. These create more and more little angels for her army until every 10,000 years a human egg appears, which is destined to end the Gaslight district. But with the mother angel being protected by the virtues, it begs the question of why this Messiah has been delayed so many times, and once again I think we can find the answer in our real life writings. Now, in the Gaslight district, there is something of a countdown for its people, but a key point of the story is that the appointed end time has been continually delayed. Every 10,000 years, an angel is supposed to lay an egg that will hatch to reveal an actual human, albeit one with black blood like the angels seem to have instead of the purple blood that the rotlings have. Somehow, this human born of an angel is meant to end the Gaslight district, and although it isn't explained how, it seems pretty obvious that this will also tie into these messianic stories. In the Christian tradition, the idea is simple. God sends down his one son, Jesus, to die for the sins of humanity. This allows Jesus to wipe away the sins of humans as a personal sacrifice, allowing them to enter heaven. But he also creates the network into heaven through which the souls can actually travel. Until this point, Jesus says that the people of the nations, and even the Jewish people themselves, were being kept out of heaven by their scribe class, the Pharisees. Meanwhile, it's not the birth of Mel that seems to end the Gaslight district, as she has been living a life there for a while. Instead, like Jesus, she is hidden away so that she can't be killed as a child or when she was in an egg. And again, like Jesus, this can lead to her being killed as an adult, in a way that fulfills some sort of prophecy. This is something the end of the pilot seems to really hint at, with Mel placing herself right at the spike where they are supposed to destroy the angel egg, and realizing that it could be her dying that way with one wrong move. And that one wrong move happened when the egg hatched. The delaying of the Messiah is something talked about both in Christianity and in Judaism. In the New Testament, this is portrayed among the many deep metaphors in the book of Revelation. In chapter 12, it gives the symbolic story of a woman trying to give birth. However, there is a dragon there waiting for her labor to end so that he can eat the baby. This is an allusion to Jesus, a messianic child that various forces didn't want to make to adulthood. The story explains that the woman does give birth, but then is sent to hide in the woods while the child is hidden by God. Here we get a similar story to Mel again, a destined apocalyptic figure whose birth has to be hidden and the child protected afterwards. This goes beyond the story of Jesus avoiding the wrath of the king of Judah at the time of his birth, and alludes more so to how his work cannot be completed until the end times, even after his death. And despite Jesus not being considered the true Messiah in Judaism, his story, and thus Mel's story, have interesting connections to their messianic prophecies as well. Now earlier, we explained that the Talmud describes 6,000 years of existence for this world, with the final 2,000 years being the period of the coming of the Messiah. If you read further, it goes on to explain that this title was given for the era because the Messiah could come at its beginning or at its end based on the redemption or ongoing sin of the Jewish people. According to the Jewish calendar, this should have been roughly 200 years within the time of the life of Jesus, though other calculations based on the Old Testament chronology and real history indicates that this time actually overlaps with the life of Jesus itself. Though this isn't the video to break down the math of the different systems, so ask your local chatbot for the different calculations if you want to find out more about that for yourself. The point is that in Judaism, they were expecting a Messiah sometime in the centuries following the life of Jesus, but the Talmud claims that they did not receive him due to their ongoing sins. This delays the Messiah, who ends their current flawed world, another 2,000 years. Similar to Mel's own appearance being delayed 10,000 years each time her egg is destroyed. Jesus describes these sins as keeping the world and even themselves out of heaven, not just with his death, but with the execution of the prophets who came before him, as described in the Old Testament books like Nehemiah. And ultimately, this is what we get in the show. While the Virtue Core appear to be working to help heaven, they, or someone above them, has to be working against heaven. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep losing this angel's egg with all of this heavy security. With Mel existing, that means it's been 10,000 years since the last egg had been stolen, and the Virtue Core should be on high alert, unless they are the ones who are actually making this happen while posing as security for heaven. Somehow, Ken himself seemed to get caught up in this, but with the desire to save and preserve Mel, becoming the parent who hides Mel away to make sure that she can reach her full age and eventually complete her work. But that raises the question of why the Virtues pose as working for heaven just to betray them like this. In the world of the Gaslight District, there isn't much to enjoy, but what little there is to enjoy is definitely scarce, and it makes sense that you'd want to hoard it for yourself. The Virtues thus get to masquerade as part of the remnant of humanity that wants to help heaven, but which is ultimately the ones delaying whatever heaven has planned so that they can live as kings in this otherwise hellish age. We see this very clearly with Diligence, who loves to inflict pain on his own people, and not just to show his anger or upset with them. When he first appears, he walks on the other Rotlings like a staircase, emphasizing how much better he thinks he is than everyone else, even the people who work with him. This is why he and the others in his group call themselves the Virtues, leaders of the Virtue Corps, people who are ultimately virtue signaling by acting like they serve heaven only to exalt themselves. And to end this era would end their own exaltation. This is the accusation Jesus makes against the Pharisees in the New Testament, where even they don't enter heaven, as we said, something shown to be very important in the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, it describes 7 seals of the apocalypse that are opened by Jesus, who is presented as a slain lamb among a chamber of slain martyrs. When it comes to the first 4 seals, each is opened with ease and their disasters are let out over the earth, but the judgment of the 5th comes with the explanation from Jesus that they must wait. Here, it explains that the ones on earth who slayed the martyrs like Jesus cannot have their final punishment until the others like the martyrs, brothers of the religion who are destined to be brutally murdered, meet them there in heaven. But how would that happen in a world where humans are immortal, where even the tortured cannot have any final death? This is the case in the Gaslight District, where final deaths are delayed through endless resurrections, creating a world more so like the one described in the mythical texts of Gnosticism. Gnosticism was a movement from the early centuries of Christianity that sought to take the biblical stories and retell them from what I would call a New Testament purist perspective. In Gnosticism, the Old Testament God is given a character similar to that of the Pharisees in the New Testament. In these various texts, the Old Testament God, referred to as the demiurge, meaning architect, is not the one true God, but a God who controls just the material world. Like the Pharisees in the New Testament, this God is presented as not allowing souls to ascend to heaven, either with him or beyond him. Instead, the human soul is used as fuel to animate the bodies of its material creations, the humans. Perhaps the greatest example of this story comes from the Apocryphon of John, where they completely invert the story of the Garden of Eden. In the original book of Genesis, the Garden of Eden, meaning paradise, is presented as a beautiful place where Adam and Eve are intended to live, serving God by tending to the plants there. In Gnostic stories like the Apocryphon of John, this Eden is a false paradise, a place where humans are forced to work for a corrupt ruler instead of the one true God who exists in the heavens above them in the realm over the demiurge. The goal of the demiurge here is to keep humans animated by the light of a divine angel known as Sophia, Greek for wisdom. Not all humans are supposed to have this light, but rather, in Gnosticism, the story is about how the elect who have this divine spark need to return up to heaven, away from the more material humans who are meant to be left behind. Here we have that same story in the Gaslight District, not just with the Virtue Cores as the Demiurge and his Archons, but with Mel as well. The Virtue Cores, particularly the Virtue of Diligence, represent the Demiurge and his Archons, entities that have seized control of the world and actually stop the others from entering heaven, literally being the guards of the gate at Paradise Lost. This is done to exalt themselves and to give themselves a better life than the people in the Gaslight District. With their resources, it seemed they were able to design robotic bodies that allow them to have abilities and probably comfort beyond anything that the denizens in the Gaslight District have with their rotting bones. But more than anything, virtues like diligence seem to just like walking on others, and no matter how great the rewards of heaven might be, that is one vice that he won't get there. The people in charge of the Gaslight District even try to present it as some sort of paradise like the fake Eden in the Gnostic texts. In the opening narration, the Gaslight District is referred to as a place of decadence, with this era of immortality being called a golden age. While this is being said, however, we see examples of the grossness of the district. Humans are eating mutant flies for food who are just themselves eating excrement, visually telling us that humans are living off of waste and decay like the vulture angels. This isn't just the narrator either, as the people of the district claim that their home is blessed, hence why it needs to be saved from the coming human. They see the district as heaven despite the rampant crime and terrible living conditions. They simply give themselves as much vice as possible in terms of smoke, booze, and gluttonous recipes to make themselves feel satisfied day by day. And that is why it's called the Gaslight District. They all have to know the world around them is a dying hell, but since all the propaganda and everyone else insists that this is a gift of immortality, no one speaks out about it. Everyone is told whatever reality they see in front of them is just not true unless they're seeing a paradise. The Gaslight District then is just the fake Garden of Eden, a place where the rotlings exist like Adam and Eve just to serve the demiurge and his archons represented by the virtues, letting everyone lie to themselves in squalor while diligence and the others enjoy the real perks and keep heaven's plans delayed. Mel, meanwhile, serves the role of both Sophia and Jesus. She is the chosen one, seemingly meant to be executed like Jesus. But Sophia ultimately follows a very similar story, with her own descent and rise mirroring that of Jesus to reflect the stories of the martyrs who follow him in the Bible. But the problem with Mel is that she has become enamored with the rotling way of life. At the start of the show, she is already 100% aware of the prophecy and her role in it, but she essentially refuses to worry about it. She doesn't want to live so that she can end the Gaslight District, but rather she wants to live so that she can be a part of it, so that she can play as mobster with Ken, Redhead, and Mud. It's basically her childhood dream. Interestingly, this has roots in the esoteric mythology as well, where the enlightening figure is actually one who cares about humans more so than the god in charge. In Christianity, this is of course Jesus, but in Gnosticism, he is also equated with the serpent of the Garden of Eden. With the Old Testament God being an ignorant evil entity, the serpent becomes the symbol of Jesus liberating humans from a fake paradise and allowing them an escape from the demiurge's control. This was no random choice, but in the pagan mythologies, the serpent is generally equated with more heroic figures. Gnosticism grew out of the Hellenistic culture in the early centuries of Christianity, people who had converted from the Greek religion. In Greek mythology, Zeus, the king of the gods, isn't always loving towards humans, and in fact actually wanted to keep the knowledge of fire away from them, and in fact he wanted to kill the humans in a great flood. This was seen by the Greeks as a parallel to the Old Testament God, who kept knowledge from humans in the Garden of Eden and sent the flood to destroy them in the book of Genesis, save for one righteous man, Noah. In the Greek mythology, however, Zeus didn't let any humans off the hook with the flood, and instead wanted them to be replaced by a race of more obedient animals once they were all dead. Prometheus, however, loved the humans. Like the serpent in the Garden of Eden, he gave humans forbidden knowledge against the will of Zeus, leading to him being punished, again, just like the serpent. When it comes to the flood, the Greek myth has Prometheus as saving the humans as well, by warning his own son Deucalion to build a boat. Essentially, the story of Noah's Ark. All of this was not done to rebel against God as the serpent is portrayed in the Bible and greater Jewish mythology, but in order to help the humans who he genuinely loves. And that's where we circle back to Mel. She embodies these ideas with her love for humans. Right now, if she had to destroy the Gaslight District or tried to delay its end, she would undoubtedly choose to try and delay it, especially if she can live within it, just wanting her precious rotlings to flourish and have fun the way only they can. She's a figure who loves humans, or rotlings in this case, but because of that is delaying what they need, their own end, their own death. While it's ultimately the virtues or the rotling rebels who prevented this so far, she's the one who is holding it all back by not seeking out her destiny in the prophecies described by the Mother Angel. Now, in addition to all of this, there's also a lot of secret information about the show, hidden in signs in the background with its coded alphabet. This seems to be the common written language of the Gaslight District, and is a one-to-one parallel with the current English alphabet. The code language in the show is fascinating, and it dates back pretty far in the work of the show's creator, Nip Sopko. Thanks to my animator Aldo, and also some help from Haro, we've managed to decode this language as it's currently used, and unravel a lot of the messages in the show and in the trailers. Though we also got a little bit help online from Twitter, reading some of the messages that are harder to see. First, at 29 seconds in, we see a sign in the Gaslight district that refers to an area called Chainport. We will actually later see the same name written in English on a map showing the directions between the Gaslight district and Paradise Lost. At 33 seconds in, a word appears on the screen when the black hand is shown as twisting humanity that simply says corrupted. At 37 seconds in, we see one of the rotlings holding up a stone tablet that has the mark of the black hand on it with some written text. It says, lie, cheat, deceive, steal, swindle, rob, evermore and evermore. This shows that the curse of the black hand is something that the people see as giving them permission to sin, which makes sense as they see themselves as cut off from heaven or existing on the outsides of it. At 39 seconds in, we have more of a description of the black hand, which we actually talked about when we decoded this for the trailer. Here it says, the body who bears the mark of the hand shall suffer injury, shall feel pain, shall witness death, but is forever tethered to the soul. Upon injury, the body will persist, bolstered by the mark. It will restore itself, but never to completion. Upon death, the seal will awaken and bind the soul to the body once more. The body of he who bears the mark of the hand has become a tomb for his soul evermore and evermore. Here it makes it clear that these aren't zombies who don't have souls just running around in material flesh, but they are the souls themselves trapped within the body. And that while it does seem to heal them to some degree, it explains here that they do not restore itself to completion, explaining why over tens of thousands of years, most of them are just bones now. At 1 minute and 16 seconds in, we get an image of the prophecy involving the human born from an angel's egg that seems to indicate that there was some sort of disaster involving nuclear bombs with its imagery. Here it says that the child born of the egg of an angel shall be the one to determine the fate of the Gaslight district, which is actually a lot more ambiguous than just ending the Gaslight district, even though that's what everyone else is sure is going to happen. Instead, it presents Mel more so as a judge, someone who's meant to judge the Gaslight district and seemingly decide what happens next. At 1 minute and 43 seconds in, we start seeing the language being used more casually, such as on the Virtue Corpse paperwork. Here it says that the description of the items being transferred include the heart of St. Andrew, the lungs of St. Jude, and something that just says Mecha Pope. At 2 minutes and 3 seconds in, it mentions the Emissary Motor Company that says it is raw magic fueled, which is interesting because with the rest of the Gaslight district using gas lamps in order to keep things lit, it makes me wonder what raw magic is and how its fuel can be used to help others and why that isn't being done. At 2 minutes and 50 seconds in, we start seeing these words being used as sound effects on screen. For instance, when Mud shoots Jack the Rat with his gun, the Gaslight code translates as death, but reversed. At 2 minutes and 53 seconds in, we get the same thing again when he pulls the trigger on his gun, with the sound just being click. Then at 3:51, we get the word bitch written backwards when Ken punches Mud. At 5 minutes and 5 seconds in, we see the sign that I mentioned earlier involving the separation of Paradise Lost and Chainport, where Aldo claims that the secret code says Angel Territory and full of poo. At 6 minutes and 40 seconds in, there's some music sheets out, and if you translate them, it's actually Claire de Lune. At 6 minutes and 50 seconds in, this bell says Stinky. Then at 7 minutes and 11 seconds in, there's a few cards in Mud's wallet that says different things, such as can't trust Mud, maybe you can, he definitely smells, and it's really bad. At 11 minutes and 8 seconds in, Aldo found a code that translates as, boy, I'd hate to be the guy who tries to decipher, it seems to say, and of course that's actually a reference to Aldo since he's the one doing it here. So with that in mind, I gave him permission to focus less on the background stuff and just the codes from here that seemed more focused on lore. At 12:14, we see the sign with the Angel Territory and full of poo again, but we also see a part saying No Man's Land. At 12 minutes and 21 seconds in, the only thing he translated here was the title that we can see, which says Inferno Processing, indicating that this is the place where rotlings are brought through before eventually being put in the prison of the Inferno. At 12:52 to 12:59, we get more of this paper that we saw earlier, where it explains that the Mecha Pope is almost complete. So it seems that the Virtues are actually trying to build some sort of new entity using different parts from different people, such as the heart of St. Andrew and the lungs of St. Jude, as we said. Inside of the truck at 12:55, there's actually boxes with different labels, including lids, CH2O, litterbug, and the heart of St. Andrew, as well as another one that just says Easter eggs. An ironic joke about the Easter egg of the heart of St. Andrew being hidden here. At 13 minutes and 22 seconds in, we also see that it says the lungs of St. Jude are there. At 4 minutes and 14 seconds in, we see some writing on the wall that says, "Long live the order of virtue, briefly may we reign." A very interesting reference to the virtues, who again seem to be trying to maintain their power as long as possible instead of helping heaven with its goals. At 14:16, it explains that the war to surmount heaven involved the angels' attempted defiance against their order, and a lot of blood ended up being shed. Great were their talons, but greater still were ours, with ours here being the virtues. The superior order prevailed through great skill and sacrifice, and the lesser order was brought to its knees to serve us forevermore. Here it makes it clear that the virtues have controlled the angels for a while and may not actually be working with heaven in the way we think. The angel mother may be well aware of the virtues actually stealing the eggs every 10,000 years, with her perhaps working alone to make sure that Mel escaped so that she could one day fulfill the prophecy. At 15 minutes and 43 seconds in, the sign above Temperance's laboratory actually says laboratory, as well as a new beginning to form a new end. At 16 minutes and 30 seconds in, there's this very interesting image of a rotling seemingly eating a heart with strange text beneath it. But when Aldo tried to translate it, it came out as a bit of a scramble, and I'll show the scramble here on screen based on what he found. When digging into the earlier codes given in the trailer and even just some live stream interviews, not all of them seem to match up with the current alphabet, indicating there might be some second version of this or another layer of code that some of these things have to be deciphered through. But as of now, our team doesn't know what that is. At 16 minutes and 56 seconds in, Ken throws his butcher knife at Temperance, and we see interesting text on the screen that, when translated, says, "Connection severed, alliance broken. Millennia and millennia of duty betrayed by a moment of manic guilt." At 17 minutes and 49 seconds in, there's a sign that says, "The great threat of the virtues, may they perdure as lifeless husk on this holy ground, locked in eternal detritus. May their wretched remains lay as a testament to their folly, for the wrath of heaven may never be tamed." Once again, hinting at the battle between the virtues and heaven and how they actually stand against them. At 19 minutes and 2 seconds in, it seems to say, "Installation process, the virtue oath. Bash and capture guardian angel. After devourment, brain shall be placed within porcelain prison, your flesh in change forgiven." Seemingly alluding to the installation of a brain inside of these robot bodies. Now at 20 minutes and 40 seconds in, we got this really interesting scene where Breadhead actually opens a pack of self-rising yeast with some interesting writing on it that says "secret magic recipe" when translated. This quick rising yeast is used to make Breadhead's bread even bigger, allowing him to become different sizes. We even see this early in the episode where we see a montage of the characters showing Breadhead becoming so big that he can pick up people's cars and eat them. When he sniffs this yeast, we see the inside of his head where some sort of sacred document is unraveled, and we can translate the text. Here it says how to make a good boy. Fill bowl with ingredients, kill 1,000 litter bugs, capture their souls, fill with water, put in large stand mixer and mix, scream and mix. Let the child rise and he will destroy. The child born of yeast shall be named Breadhead, a golem of kindness and sweet sugar. He shall be large and soft, he shall destroy buildings and be bigger than anyone else, he shall be destruction. This hints at how Breadhead is ultimately a pretty soft personality despite his job being to destroy things. But it also indicates that he's not the actual son of Ken, and like Mel, more of an adoptive child who seems to have some sort of magical purpose. As the document says, he's an actual golem, which is an artificial being created through magic or alchemy in order to serve humans. Finally, at 22 minutes and 32 seconds in, we get this text behind Mel on the wall that is actually the same as we read earlier. The one that says, "The body of he who bears the mark of the hand shall suffer injury, shall feel pain, shall witness death, but is forever tethered." So far, that's all the codes that we were able to decipher ourselves, and even with some help from people online. But it should give you a pretty good idea, along with all of these theories, of what's going on in the world of the Gaslight District. Let us know your theories, your hopes, and opinions on the show in the comments down below. If you want to talk more about the Gaslight District, be sure to head on over to our Discord server, link in the pinned comment down below, or follow us on one of our many different social media accounts. We've got your favorite somewhere down there, link in the description down below.